La Belle Dame Sans Merci by John Keats was written in 1819, but wasn't published until the 20th of May 1820 in the weekly literary periodical The Indicator. It tells the story of an unnamed medieval knight who is discovered wandering, lonely, pale and ill, at the edge of a lake in the depths of winter by an unnamed speaker who presses him to tell him what is wrong. The knight takes over the narrative, explaining that he met a beautiful fairy woman in the meadow who seduced him. After spending the whole day together, the woman takes him back to her grotto and lulls him into a sleep which is plagued by nightmares of kings and princes, just as pale and ill as he, who warn him that La Belle Dame Sans Merci, or the beautiful lady without mercy, has him in her power. He wakes cold and alone on the hillside, destined to remain by the side of the lake until he pines away and dies. The poem's medieval and romantic subject matter inspired a number of paintings by members of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The poem can perhaps be read as a cautionary tale that warns its reader of some kind of danger. In this case, the peril of falling for the charms of a beautiful but unattainable female, exploring as it does the themes of unrequited love, which is a love that is destined to remain unsatisfied, obsession, and death. Although the poem is not autobiographical, there are elements that were clearly inspired by events in Keats's own life. It was written not long after the death of his 19-year-old brother Tom of tuberculosis, an infectious and at that time incurable disease of the lungs, through which Keats nursed him until he died in December 1818. It was probably also during this time that Keats exposed himself to the disease, which would go on to take his life some 3 years later at the age of 25. Keats would have watched in horror as his once healthy and vibrant younger brother slowly wasted away, and it's not too much of a leap to accept that these observations informed his description of the ailing knight-at-arms who is so pale, haggard and woe-begone. Keats had also, in the final months of his brother's life, met Fanny Brawne, a young lady upon whom all his desires came to be concentrated. And, although they had come to an informal understanding, there was never a formal engagement due to his own dire financial situation. The depth of his obsession with her, his frustration that their love remained unconsummated, and his preoccupation with his own mortality can be seen not only in the poem, but also in the many letters he wrote her. In one he tells her, "I have 2 luxuries to brood over in my walks, your loveliness and the hour of my death." And in another, "My love has made me selfish. I cannot exist without you. I am forgetful of everything but seeing you again. My life seems to stop there. I see no further. You have absorbed me. I have a sensation at the present moment as though I was dissolving. I should be exquisitely miserable without the hope of soon seeing you. I've been astonished that men could die martyrs for religion. I have shuddered at it. I shudder no more. I could be martyred for my religion. Love is my religion. I could die for that. I could die for you." La Belle Dame Sans Merci is a ballad which is a narrative poem from the oral tradition, usually written in quatrains or 4-line stanzas, of which there are 12 in this poem. Ballads usually have a bass meter of alternating iambic tetrameter, di-dum, 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 and iambic trimeter, di-dum, di-dum, di-dum. Although in this poem the first 3 lines of the stanza are in iambic tetrameter, e.g., "O what can ail thee, knight-at-arms?" while the fourth is in either iambic dimeter, di-dum, di-dum, e.g., and no birds sing, or headless iambic trimeter, dum, di-dum, di-dum, e.g., and her eyes were wild. In two places, Keats indicates, using a grave accent, that the ed ending on past participles is to be articulated, e.g., lulled. Not only does this archaism maintain the regularity of the iambic rhythm, but it also serves to signal that the poem is set in the distant past. Lines are mostly end-stopped, although there are a number of incidences of enjambment, usually between lines 3 and 4, and caesura. Keats also employs various repetition techniques, such as anaphora, polyptoton, and epizeuxis, to add rhythmic interest and to enhance meaning. The poem has an A-B-C-B rhyme scheme, where rhymes are masculine or single, e.g. child and wild, although a number of these are imperfect, e.g. begone and done, which serve to enhance the sense of the knight's world being out of kilter. The poem has two speakers, the initial unidentified speaker who encounters the knight in the first place, and the knight himself who takes up the narration from the fourth stanza onwards. The poem has a circular structure in that the knight echoes the words of the speaker from the first stanza almost exactly in the final stanza, seemingly indicating the way in which he is trapped here, destined to remain by the wintry lake's edge until he dies. There's extensive use of polysyndeton, which not only serves to link the poem's narrative elements together, but also gives a sense of inevitability as we follow the knight on the path to his doom. Keats was a second-generation romantic poet, along with Percy Bysshe Shelley and George Gordon Byron, and a popular element of the Romantic movement, the use of natural imagery to communicate and accentuate human emotion, is in evidence in this poem. Note the use of pathetic fallacy as Keats uses a cold and desolate wintry landscape at both the beginning and the end to enhance the knight's current bleak emotional state, which he contrasts with the obvious spring or summer-like landscape full of flowers, honey wild and manna dew, that the knight enjoyed at the height of his happiness while being seduced by the Belle Dame. The title, La Belle Dame Sans Merci, or The Beautiful Lady Without Mercy, is derived from a 15th century poem about courtly love by the French poet Alain Chartier, called La Belle Dame Sans Merci. This lengthy poem, running to 800 lines, consists of a dialogue between an unhappy lover who gives the object of his desire many reasons for accepting him, only for her to repeatedly turn him down. This type of female character is the archetypal femme fatale, or siren, a beautiful woman who seduces a man, sometimes through using her singing to enchant him, only to cause him pain and distress, and has become a common character in literature and art, in various forms from ancient history to the present day. The poem begins with the unidentified speaker addressing the knight and asking him what is wrong. "Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, alone and palely loitering?" A knight-at-arms was, during the Middle Ages, typically a man of noble birth who had been trained in the use of weapons, horsemanship, and the chivalric code, who was often sent out on quests. The speaker, however, describes him as palely loitering. The verb to loiter means to stand or wait around without any apparent purpose, and the adverb palely suggests that he is either ill, distressed, or both. Note also how the consonants of the liquid l sounds in alone and palely loitering are awkward to articulate because they're so close together and automatically lend the poem a jarring tone. The speaker is clearly puzzled at both the knight's demeanour and location as he continues, The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Sedge is a grass-like plant that typically grows in wet ground, but the speaker observes that it has withered or died, and the fact that there are also no birds singing because they have migrated suggests that it's winter. Why is the night alone in such a God-forsaken place? The first line of the second stanza repeats the first line of the first in a technique known as anaphora, and serves to emphasise the speaker's puzzlement and concern, as well as perhaps indicating that the knight has failed to answer the first time. Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, so haggard and so woe-begone? Once more the speaker concentrates on his appearance and demeanour. He is haggard, looking exhausted and unwell, and woe-begone, or sad and miserable. Again he communicates his bewilderment that the knight should be there at all. The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest's done. The squirrel has collected enough acorns to see it through the winter, and all the crops have been gathered in, leaving a landscape that is dormant and barren, and where the knight really has no business to be. In the third stanza, the speaker looks more closely at the knight's face, which he describes using a pair of contrasting metaphors. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose fast withereth too. A lily is a flower that is typically white, evoking the paleness of the knight's skin. Not only this, but it is moist or damp from sweat or fever dew, caused by anguish or mental torment. The lily is also a flower that is strongly associated with death, and its flourishing on his brow or forehead suggests that he may be mortally ill. Any colour, an indication of health, that he has had in his cheeks, communicated by the metaphor of the red or pink rose, is fading, as it fast withereth too. Roses, especially red ones, are also strongly associated with love and romance, and so the fact that it is fading and withering is also strongly indicative that what ails the knight is to do with love. Note the polyptotonic repetition of withered from the first stanza and withereth, which serves to strengthen the link between the external landscape and the knight's internal emotional landscape. The knight now takes over the narration as he explains, I met a lady in the meads, or meadow. He has clearly fallen in love at first sight, as he describes her as being full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. Although he seems to be aware of her supernatural essence, he is captivated by her youth and her obvious beauty, which is dainty and graceful, yet untamed. The wildness in her eyes suggests he is conscious that she may have a dangerous spirit, yet he appears powerless to treat her with caution. Note the consonants of the liquid l sounds in these lines, which, in contrast to its effect in the first stanza, is euphonic and creates a sense of harmony. Clearly entranced, he decorates her with flowers, making a garland for her head and bracelets to and fragrant zone, or a belt of flowers to adorn her waist. The presence of flowers suggests that we're now in either spring or summer. Has the knight been wandering by the lake for months? Does this mysterious lady have the power to control the seasons? Or has this whole experience been some kind of dream, brought on either by illness or supernatural meddling? The rest of this stanza is ambiguous with regard to the level of sexual intimacy the two enjoy. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. We can't be sure what Keats means exactly by she did love. Has their relationship been consummated, or is she merely being highly flirtatious and suggestive as she whispers sweet nothings in his ear? We'll never know. Whatever they've got up to, though, he now picks her up and sets her on his pacing steed, or horse, and rides around with her all day. She makes sure that he is totally absorbed in her, so that he nothing else saw all day long, for sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy's song. Sirens were human-like beings in Greek mythology who had captivating voices that they used to lure sailors to their doom, and it appears that this beautiful lady is up to similar tricks, as she uses a fairy song with all its associations of magic to alienate the knight from the rest of the world. In the 7th stanza, the knight goes on to detail how she finds him tasty morsels to eat and drink, such as roots of relish sweet and honey wild and manna dew. The word manna relates to the substance miraculously provided by God to the Israelites for them to eat as they were wandering in the wilderness after having been freed from slavery by Moses, as related in the book of Exodus in the Bible. And so Keats is using it here to communicate how this dew appears to the knight divine. The irony, of course, is that while the Israelites had just been freed, the knight's own form of enslavement has just begun. As she continues to ply him with this enchanted food, sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. We're not given any more details about what this language strange is, or how he's able to understand it for that matter, but it serves to underline once more that she is a creature of another world. Once he's eaten, she takes him to her elfin grot, or fairy cave, and there she wept and sighed full sore. To sigh full sore just means that she sighs as though she is consumed by mental torment. Why is she so upset, though? Is she just pretending, or is she perhaps just as enslaved as he, doomed to eternally lure unfortunate knights to their death? The knight, however, is so enthralled that he doesn't seem to question her distress, instead just shutting her wild, wild eyes with kisses in order to stop her tears. Note how Keats once more describes her eyes as wild, although this time he uses a technique called epizeuxis, which is where a word or phrase is repeated in immediate succession to emphasize their passion. He continues, and there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamt on the cold hillside. Note Keats's use of anaphora, and there, which is carried over from the end of the preceding stanza, which gives the reader a sense that the poem is building up to its climax. This is also suggested by the use of caesura in the 2nd line, which is the poem's first instance of a significant midline pause, as the knight interrupts himself with the somewhat archaic exclamation of distress, ah, woe betide, to communicate that something unpleasant is about to happen to him. Note the polyptotonic dreamed, dream and dreamt in these lines, which suggests the significance of what he shall experience while asleep. Indeed, we find out that it was the latest or last dream he ever dreamt, suggesting that he's been unable to sleep since that time and that the hillside is already cold, hinting at her departure. In the 10th stanza, the knight describes this nightmare. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La Belle Dame Sans Merci, thee hath in thrall. It seems that he's not the first to be seduced by this beautiful spirit. Better men than he, kings and princes, have also fallen under her spell. Note the repetition of the adjective pale, which appears 3 times in these 2 lines. Not only does it echo the description of the knight in the 1st stanza to suggest that he is set for the same fate, but it is also perhaps an allusion to the 4th horseman of the apocalypse, Death, from the book of Revelation in the Bible, who rode a pale horse. These dead men, the harbingers of his own death, cry out in unison that the beautiful lady without mercy has him in thrall, or in bondage. He continues, painting a nightmarish vision of the emaciated appearance of these dead men in the gloam or twilight as their mouths hang open with a horrid warning on their starved lips. I saw their starved lips in the gloam, with horrid warning gaped wide, until he awakes to find himself once more on the cold hillside. The final stanza reiterates the first as the knight explains that this is why I sojourn or stay here, alone and palely loitering, though the sedge is withered from the lake and no birds sing. The fact that the two stanzas are almost exactly the same indicates that even after telling this somewhat fanciful story, the knight is still no further forward, as he seems resigned to his powerlessness to leave the lake behind. Note that the final line scans or reads better if the final foot, birds sing, is read as a spondy, dum-dum, rather than an I am, didum, and no, birds sing, in order to give the poem, if not the knight, a sense of closure. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.